This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Rabbi, so I want to share with you, we just came back from London, and we've been giving a few classes on some of the Rabbanim who live there. We spoke about Rav David Nieto. We had the privilege to go to his kever. He's buried in Queen Mary University. They built the university around his kever. Also, we went to the kever of Rav Rafael Moldulo, who wrote Chupas Chasanim. We also went to the kever of Rav Joshua Di Silva and Rav Abdana. I want to speak to you perhaps about the greatest Rav who ever made his way to England, and his name was Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas. Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas even preceded Rav David Nieto in the 17th century. He was one of the greatest Rabbanim ever to live in Morocco. So, wait a second, I thought you said he's a Rav in London, so let me explain. Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas was born in the year Shin Ayin. That is the year 1610 in North Africa. He was born to a very wealthy and prestigious family of Spanish exilees, and he was actually a descendant of the Ramban, Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas. From a very young age, he was acclaimed as very knowledgeable in all areas of Torah. When he was 12 years old, he already completed the entire Shas and was Baki in the 4 Turei Shulchan Aruch. 12 years old. Now we're in the year 1628. He's 18 years old, and he was already considered one of the Gedolei Hadar in the year 1628 when he was 18 years old. He became the Dayan in the city of Talmisan. He sat there on his throne of Dayanos for 20 years. And during his reign, the philosophy and the poison of Shabtai Tzvi spread all the way to Morocco. Shabtai Tzvi was born in Izmir in the year 1626. Shabtai Tzvi also was a brilliant scholar. By the age of 20, he was proficient in the entire Torah, Nigla and Nistar. He gathered many, many followers, including many Rabbanim, and many thought, and most thought, that he in fact would reveal himself as Mashiach Amiti. However, Shabtai Tzvi told his followers that the Geula is coming. He even ordered that nobody fast on Tisha B'Av, as the Mashiach is imminent. The prophet of Shabtai Tzvi, of course, was Nathan of Azza, Nasan Ha'azasi. The father of Nathan, Elisha Ashkenazi, was one of the very fervent believers in Shabtai Tzvi. So Nathan's father actually moved from Germany and made the trip to Eretz Yisrael, and then traveled to Morocco together with Reb Chia Dayan, and they were the ones who spread Shabtos to Morocco. Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas, a young man, so he's maybe 38 years old, he saw through the whole thing, and he was one of the first and only to see through the facade, and he fought with venom against the movement of the Shabtos, together with Rav Aaron Hasavoni and Rav Daniel Toledano. And you have to understand what we're dealing with. In those times, many, many Jews had stopped fasting on Tisha B'Av. In the year Tav Vav, the year Tav Vav is 1646, Rav Yaakov Sasportas was fighting a losing battle. They imprisoned him in Talmisan because his opposers spread all kinds of accusations against him, until Rav Yaakov had to bribe his way out, and he went to live in the city of Sali. He became the Rav in Sali. Now, in Sali, there was tremendous famine. So Rav Yaakov Sasportas had to leave Morocco. He comes to Amsterdam, in Holland. He is received in Amsterdam with great honor. He becomes the head of the yeshiva Eitz Chaim. Okay, he continues his war against Shabtos, together with some other great Rabbanim, Rav Shmuel Abuhav from Venice, Rav Shimon Shapiro of Prague, Rav Yosef Levi of Livorno, and he was also continues to fight a losing battle. Bottom line is, in the end, Shabtai Tzvi was imprisoned and he converted to Islam, which in Turkey, and basically during this Tekufa, Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas communicated and wrote to another very interesting gadol, Rabbi Menashe ben Yisrael, Menashe ben Israel. Menashe ben Israel was born in Portugal in 1604. Menashe ben Israel was born to a Marrano family in Portugal, and he was taken as a kid to Amsterdam, which was a haven for the Marranos. And without getting into the details of Rabbi Menashe's background, Rabbi Menashe ben Israel was a great believer in the imminent coming of Mashiach as well. However, he did not believe in the Shabtai Tzvi. Menashe ben Israel, one of the most colorful personalities of all time. Rembrandt has two famous portraits of Menashe ben Israel. Menashe ben Israel was actually a friend of Rembrandt. Menashe ben Israel believed in the imminent coming of the Mashiach, and he had a very interesting belief. And that is, he believed the American native Indians were the Aseres HaShvatim. And he proves it with what he feels conclusively, that the American native Indians were the Aseres HaShvatim, and in that case, the Jewish people had been spread to Dalet Kanfos Haaretz. The only country then that the Jews have not been spread to was England, because the Jews were expelled from England in the year 1290. So it was Menashe ben Israel's belief that if the Jews would be allowed a re-entry into England, then Mashiach could come. Because the only thing holding up the coming of Mashiach is Klal Yisrael being exiled to the Kitzei Haaretz, the edge of the world. Because they're already in America. America was a Yiddish country for hundreds and hundreds of years. People think, no, only since Borough Park. No, the American native Indians, the Redskins. The Redskins are a Yiddish team. Yeah? Anyway, Rabbi Isai. What do you... I know some, anyway. So, Menashe ben Israel and Yaakov Sasportas come together, and they both want to gain the Jewish people access back to England. So, in the year 1655, Menashe ben Israel, together with Yaakov Sasportas, they come to London. Now, when they come to London, in 1665, Rav Yaakov Sasportas was appointed the chief rabbi of London. So Rav Yaakov Sasportas, who was one of the all-time great, sharp Achronim, was appointed the chief rabbi of London, and he together with Menashe ben Israel petitioned Oliver Cromwell to allow the Jews re-entry into London. Now, in these efforts, Menashe ben Israel wrote a pamphlet called "Humble Addresses to the Lord Protector." You could look it up online. You could we have it. You could read the petition that Menashe ben Israel made to Oliver Cromwell to allow the Jews re-entry. And amazingly, Oliver Cromwell did not gain the Jews official re-entry into England. They were not recognized as official citizens. However, when the war broke out between Spain and England, so now the Jews who were of Spanish descent, now the England had a dilemma, because if they're going to consider these Jews Spaniards, they're going to have to kick them out. If they're going to consider them Jews, they're going to have to kick them out. So they allowed these Jews to proclaim their status as Jews and stay unofficially. But not until the year 1753 were the Jews allowed official access back into England. Now, Menashe ben Israel left London, left England, despondent, downhearted. He felt he was not successful in accomplishing his goal. But Oliver Cromwell did allow the Jews re-entry on an informal basis. But he left England penniless. And then when he left, his son Shmuel, who had accompanied him, passed away on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Menashe sailed with the coffin to Middelburg, Holland, and soon after he himself died at a very young age of 53. But back to Rav Yaakov Sasportas, so he is now the chief rabbi in London. In the year 1659, what year was Rav Yaakov Sasportas born? He was born, what? 1610. So in 1659, in 1693, Rav Yaakov Sasportas returns to Amsterdam.
83 years old.
Why did he return to Amsterdam? There was a plague in England. and instead of die in the plague, he fled. And in, again, 1693, he goes back to Amsterdam. For 5 years, he served as the chief Ashkenazic rabbi in Amsterdam, and he died b'Seva Tova in the year Taf Nun Ches, 1698. So that means he lived 88 years old. So this is Rabbi Yaakov Sasportas, probably the greatest Rav who ever lived in England and in London. And him and Menashe and Israel are really responsible for ultimately allowing the Jews re-entry in the year 1753. Rabbi, I have a great Shabbos.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.